She stood in front of her professor, not angry, but clear. Why was she being taught outdated ideas? Ideas that were decades old in a world that had already moved forward. That moment didn't get her applause. It got her sent straight to the dean's office. But instead of backing down, Lynn Quinn drew a Venn diagram. Her truth on one side, the professor's truth on the other side, and in the space between, she shaded that middle ground pink. And that's where her life's work began. Because what if communication isn't about winning the point and being right, but a place to find where understanding lives? And if you've ever walked into a conversation ready for battle, if you ever felt like you're either pushing too hard or shrinking to keep the peace, if you're tired of repeating the same stuck patterns in meetings, relationships, or even in your own head, you're not alone. Today's episode takes you from tense, tangled communication to clarity, calm, and connection, so you can build real trust and lead with confidence. You'll learn how to spot which of the 4 zones of communication you're operating from, a simple 10-second reset ritual that changes how you enter hard conversations, and why speaking from the I perspective transforms how you're heard and how you hear. This is what Season 3 is all about, building an authentic foundation rooted in presence, trust, and self-awareness. Because real leadership and real community, it starts with how you choose to show up. And that's the mission of UnCeiling You, helping ambitious women break past invisible ceilings, leading with clarity, and rising with purpose. Let's get into it. Lynn, thank you so much for joining the UnCeiling You podcast. I really appreciate you being here. And now we are talking about communication, and you created something that is called the 4 zones of communication. Could you walk us through all of the zones, why understanding these zones helps build trust and community?
Yes. And thank you, Natalie, for having me here today. The 4 zones of communication are pink, yellow, higher, and halt. So the pink zone is based on a shared understanding. This is where 2 people agree on the premise of a conversation. The yellow zone is an ambiguous understanding. So this is when somebody might say something like, that thing is good. That's a very ambiguous word. So it's difficult to really understand what that is. And also, good and bad and right and wrong are different for each people. And it's difficult to create that pink zone understanding with these in place. The higher zone is a universal understanding. This is a symbiotic relationship. It's where there's a connection between the speaker and the listener, and it's on a foundation of meaning well, that mutual benefit. And the halt zone, this is when the yellow zone ambiguity builds so much that there's a primitive instinct to disrupt the environment. And this could be by throwing something at a wall or yelling. It's that extreme behavior and that breaking point.
Okay. So if we were talking about the yellow zone, how would you describe that same statement that you had, this thing is good, and put it into a pink zone? Like, what would that look like instead? How would you be more shared?
Okay. So for example, let's say I personally don't eat meat. So I'm a vegetarian. So somebody in the yellow zone may say steak is good for you. But for me, steak is not good for me because I don't eat meat, and then I will not feel well if I eat meat. So the main part about the differences between the pink and the yellow zone are that foundational understanding, where that speaker who's telling me steak is good for me is not understanding my individual perspective and is kind of pushing their beliefs onto me. And that's a very common part of the yellow zone, is where someone's unique beliefs are pushed onto another. That's why the pink zone is so important to recognize. My understanding of meat and food is very different than other people's understanding, and to be conscious of that as I speak.
I can see that for sure. And it's interesting in my role in my day job in diagnostic sales. I started off in sales, and I would often want because I'm hearing a customer perspective, our operations team who has to perform a test, like has to accept urine or accept blood, and then run a test on it and deliver an answer to the physician. The physician, the customer, would want the test performed in a certain way. And from my perspective, the customer should get what they want. However, from a operations perspective, the person, the scientist that is running the test, there is a right way to run the test, a wrong way to run the test. There are specific regulations they have to follow. And I could see where I would get into a push and pull type of system because I'm trying to push on the customer's perspective, yet the operations person is like, wait, I can't do that. The regulations say no. And it would take quite a bit of time because I was in that push zone trying to push the perspective of the client on. And it took work.
Yes. And what you're describing is a great example of the difference between the pink zone and the yellow zone, where you're in the middle of two different entities, the lab and what they want, and the customer and what they want. Mm-hmm. So that's how the pink zone takes into account both of those perspectives in the best possible way.
Yeah. So in the example you described with the meat, the example that I describe with being a salesperson, trying to make sure that the operations person is hearing the customer. Do you have a favorite prompt or practice for someone who may be starting out? And I know I felt overwhelmed trying to get the message across. And I'm sure the operations person felt overwhelmed. What practice can be done to get people out of that overwhelm or stuck?
That's a great question. And there's a very simple saying that I do when I feel the yellow zone coming on or the halt zone. And I encourage people to say this before reflection writing. That's a type of writing and introspective tool that I teach. So before every class, we take a moment and say, I recognize the past, I let go. I recognize the present, I am here. I recognize the future, I am open. Thank you. So what this does, it seems very simple, but it's rewiring the brain. It's changing the person's energy as well as their physiology to recognize the past is gone. I am in the present right now, and the future to be open, as opposed to yellow zone would be thinking, okay, well, this operations person is going to say this, or this is going to happen. It's pumping someone full of false beliefs before that reality has a chance to blossom. So that's why this is so important to let go of the past, be open to the future, and recognize that each interaction we have as humans is different. Each time you speak to the operations person and that customer, they could be in a different mood. They could have different distractions going on. So that's why it's important to have this little saying and then really be in the present.
Can you say it one more time for our listeners?
Yes, of course. I recognize the past, I let go. I recognize the present, I am here. I recognize the future, I am open. Thank you.
I like that because especially when you explain, hey, you may be thinking operations person is going to say this. That may not be true. And it is true. I'm like ready. If they say this, I'm going to do that. If they say that, I'm going to do this. And so I'm like on the hunt. And definitely that's how I was as a salesperson talking with the operation. Like, I'm going to watch their body. I'm going to watch their face. I'm going to watch all of it to figure out. And I was trying to anticipate what the future was instead of realizing it has lots of good opportunities or possibilities.
Yes. And you hit on a very important part of this quick saying is that last part. Thank you. That thank you is to everything. It's to the operations person, to the customer, to oneself, to the sun in the sky and the rain on a cloudy day. It's just saying thank you. So as you mentioned, that mindset is a little more positive instead of going in there with these false negative yellow zone beliefs. It opens up the mind to a pink zone reality. Maybe the operations person is going to really help and this is going to go smoothly. So that's an important part of being in the pink zone is to be a little optimistic and tap into infinite possibility. As you mentioned, there's an infinite amount of different scenarios that can rise and to be a little optimistic.
Yeah, thank you for that. I can let my imagination run in the negative. And so for someone who might have the same tendency, but you don't want to admit it, I just admitted it for you.
Yeah, that's good. That's Natalie. That's a great example of being in the pink zone. And even I would say the higher zone to be open and vulnerable and to say, hey, I'm human. I have my mistakes and it's okay.
Yeah. Can you say a little bit more about the higher zone? I'm really interested in that.
Yes, the higher zone is my favorite zone. It's synonymous with a flow state where things work out magically. For example, I knocked a pen at my desk and then I just caught it. Just that like, whoa, that's amazing. Or speaking with someone, maybe at the grocery store, commenting on their shoes, and then that conversation turns into a friendship. It's that connection, that bond. It's when the pink zone is elevated. So there's that shared understanding. There's that wanting what's best for oneself and others. And then that building into wanting what's best for everything on the planet, to be conscious of that connection that we all have. If I have an argument with someone, to be compassionate towards them. They could be having a bad day, and to give them the benefit of the doubt and to recognize that each human is doing the best they can. Whatever that looks like is different, but each of us really is doing the best we can for what we're working with.
Yeah, I like that. So understanding layers of consciousness is important in life and in communication because we may not be conscious of what our thoughts are. So what are these layers?
Yes, this is a big part of my approach to communication that's very different to others. Mine is centered around layers of consciousness. And the layers are a subconscious process, consciousness, universal consciousness, and unconscious. So subconscious are stereotypes. It's that operating system in the mind. It's based on the past. So it's when this happened. So if this, then that, based on the past. And it's necessary. If humans consciously thought of every decision throughout the day, we would be even more overwhelmed than we already are. So the subconscious process is helpful, but it's amplified when a conscious process is mixed with it. So as we mentioned earlier, speaking with the operations person, a subconscious process would be, this happened last time. He's going to tell me this, derp, 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 derp. A conscious process, being in the pink zone, is okay, today's a different day. There's different situations, and then being open to something changing. That's a big element of consciousness, and conscious process is that element of change. And as we mentioned, the universal consciousness is a part of the higher zone. And this is that inner knowing. It's where non-local communication takes place. Non-local communication is signal-less communication. Local communication is signaled communication. So right now we are communicating locally through signals. Non-local communication, an element of the higher zone, is just thinking and feeling. For example, if I have a loved one that walks in the room and they're having a great day, and I just, I get a little pep in my step, just simply being around that person. They didn't say anything. I might not have even physically seen them, but their presence within my essence just lifts me up. And that's universal consciousness. Unconscious, that's when someone's asleep or knocked out. I have a little pet peeve that people interchange subconscious with unconscious. I feel that it's very important to refer to the subconscious because then that's reachable. That's something that I can grab. But unconsciousness, to be I feel like there's a wall, and people kind of use that as a scapegoat. Well, I was unconsciously thinking this, or when I did that, I was unconscious. It gives them an escape, but to say it was subconscious, there's a bit more accountability there.
Yeah, because then, how many times have I heard myself or even other people say, I was thinking that, but I kind of tucked it away. I wanted to say that, bring this up in a meeting, but I poo-pooed it in my own head. Somebody else said it and it got rave reviews. Darn it. I should have paid attention to my subconscious.
Yes. And I also feel that intuition is very much linked to the subconscious. As you said, your intuition was speaking up to say something, but then the ego came in and was like, oh, what if this happens? What if that happens? And that's part of the pink and the yellow zone. The ego is a part of the yellow zone, that piece of the mind that says, oh, no, don't do it. This might happen. Whereas the pink zone is being more open and in a connection with intuition to feel that gut feeling and then take a chance.
Well, it's kind of funny that you mentioned that subconscious is part of that intuition, because I was thinking maybe that was universal consciousness.
Yes, Natalie, you're getting it. Yes, very much so. Intuition is a part of both of those. And as I was mentioning earlier, where the pink zone builds into the higher zone, the yellow zone builds into the halt zone. So just as you're saying, for the example of speaking up in the meeting, in the pink zone, your intuition would have encouraged you to speak. You would have spoke, and then the whole room would have been in attention with you and saying what a great idea that is and being on board with this new direction that you're taking. That would be the higher zone, because that whole group has the same vision and way to walk on a path.
Yeah, I'm thinking about some of the things that I do in my day job is managing projects. And so we'll be in a room and we're trying to work through the scope of the project so that we fully understand the product that we're producing for the world and what that entails, because it's so important to understand the scope. If you don't understand the scope, you get scope creep and then the product never gets out the door. And so it's so important to get everybody into the pink zone, but I have to allow folks' yellow zones to come out so that we can get that out there, because if it doesn't get out there with the whole group, then all of a sudden we have all these side conversations happening and the people are talking down about the project, but not in front of me and not in front of the group in such a way that we can actually resolve the situation. And
yes,
I hate that.
Well, what you beautifully painted all four of the zones right there with that example. And as you're saying, if the air isn't released from the yellow zone, it can turn into the halt zone. And that's a really great thing that you noticed right there, is to address yellow zone issues so they don't turn into halt zone, where you mentioned the people are kind of whispering, kind of not feeling great about the project. That's the yellow zone. But then maybe someone says, this is dumb. I'm going to sabotage the project. I'm going to see that this doesn't happen. That's when the halt zone comes in, when the person is just, I'm done with this reality, and takes drastic measures to shift them.
Yeah. And I have to be aware of that. I have to build trust among people so that if they don't feel like they can say it in front of the whole group, that they can come to me individually and present their concerns so that we can address it.
Yes, I really like how you're taking a multi-pronged approach to feedback. And that's so important, especially with the prevalence of neurodiversity. I'm neurodivergent. My brain works in a very different way than the academic school system hoped it would. And just as you're saying, somebody could have a great idea, but they're too shy to speak up in the group. So to essentially force them to speak in the group as the only way to express themselves is detrimental to the wellness of the group. So I think it's very important that you're taking that into account and maybe even offer email options, something as silly as a suggestion box where the feedback is anonymous. That's another thing. People get yellow zone thoughts. If I say this, then this is going to happen and that. And then it just like dominoes, it cascades. So the person who has this idea won't speak up. So sometimes anonymity also helps with tapping into the pink zone.
Great. Okay. So the mind is at capacity, connection becomes complicated. So in your work, talk about the Ferris wheel of the mind. What is that?
Oh, Natalie, it's one of my favorite things. And as I mentioned, I'm neurodivergent. So I think in pictures. I see pictures in my head. And one of the things I see is a Ferris wheel. And I can tell my zone by what that Ferris wheel looks like. So I'll go through each of the zones and explain how that looks on the Ferris wheel. So the pink zone, that's open to receive. So the Ferris wheel in my mind, and to clarify too, each of the carts is kind of like a thought or an action or a task. It's something that needs to be done. And it goes all the way around the Ferris wheel, and then it gets its attention. And then either the idea is resolved and the person gets out of the cart, or another person goes in the cart. So instead of one thing, there's two. So it's this constant process of being approached with tasks and then resolving them. So that's the basic premise of the carts on the Ferris wheel. So we've got the pink zone. There's a couple empty cards, 2 people in the cards. And there's this open capacity. So more thoughts, more interactions, more new ideas can enter. The yellow zone, it's getting a little more crowded. There's probably no empty carts. There's a couple carts where people are squished together. So in other words, that email that's been sitting in my inbox for a week and I don't want to respond, that's one of those crowded carts. So there's less of a desire to receive information and to do new things. So then we're going to go to the halt zone. So this is how the yellow zone is building into something more. So there's more cards, there's more ideas, there's more deadlines. Let's say a pipe breaks in the house. So then I have to stop and do that. So it's just all these things keep adding. That's the halt zone. And that's when someone just breaks. It's the breakdown point because the carts are too full. There's no capacity for more. And then the higher zone, this is when, as we mentioned earlier, that board meeting where everything went great, where the carts, there's a couple people in each wheel, everyone's having a great time, there's a beautiful sunset, and there's that overall deep sense of peace, open ability to receive, and an excitement for it. Like this interview here. This is the higher zone. We have this excitement to ride the Ferris wheel in the mind and see what we see.
Yeah. Okay. I think I usually have an open Ferris wheel in the morning, and by 5 p.m., we're done.
Yes, you get it, Natalie. And that's one of the important things about recognizing that. Okay, it's the morning. I can take on this extra task. I can do these things. But then by the afternoon, okay, I'm a little yellow zone. And then being aware of that and saying, I'm not going to make that phone call. That can wait till tomorrow. That to not add any more to the cart.
Yeah, and I'm not open right now to hearing what they have to say because I am overwhelmed, and I will cause this relationship to go in a negative place if I do this now. But if I do it tomorrow morning, we'll all be good.
Yeah.
Yay. Thank you for that. And I love the pictures. Now, when Where do most people get stuck, do you think? And how can they recognize exactly which zone they're in and how to get to the next zone?
Okay, so I'm going to see if I can answer all three of those questions
Okay.
with one answer. And the answer, you.
Okay.
So, and when I say you, I mean the you perspective. Many people speak from the you perspective, as we mentioned earlier, in that this steak is good for you. So it's telling somebody else what's healthy for them or what's going on with them. That's going to lead to the yellow zone. Whereas if somebody speaks from the I perspective, I feel this way. This is what's going on with me. That's the fastest, easiest way to recognize the zone and then to get out of it. So to recognize it is to stop and say, am I speaking from the you perspective or am I speaking from the I perspective? And if it is the you perspective, to just shimmy and switch over to the I perspective.
Okay. Yeah. And so what that means is I need to understand what I'm feeling when we're in a conversation.
Yes. So that's a key part, and you nailed it. A large reason why people are in the yellow zone is because it's a subconscious process. As you're saying, they don't even really recognize their own feelings. So they're not going to take the I perspective. They're just going to push their feelings onto you because it creates that wall and that barrier between themselves and their thoughts. And that's one of the reasons why I teach reflection writing. It's an introspective tool. And in that container of reflection writing, there's only the I perspective. The word you does not exist in that container. So it helps rewire the person's brain to really start thinking of the I. And then what are those I statements? And then dig deeper into them. I feel introspection is a really essential piece and the foundation for speaking in the pink zone.
Yeah. And I think if we all want to be excellent leaders, we need to be introspective. That introspection helps us go in the direction that allows us to be our best self.
Yes, I agree.
So, just one more time, what is pink zone communication and why is it so important? If you were to summarize it, and why did you call it the pink zone, by the way?
Okay, so the origin story of the pink zone was when I was at college. I was a student at WSU, Washington State University. Go Cougs! And I would like to say I love WSU. I'm a member of the Alumni Association, and I think it was a great experience for me. And it led to the zones. So how it led to the zones, I was studying psychology, and I recognized that the curriculum I was being taught was the same curriculum the generation before me was taught. So I'm Generation X, and the baby boomers were learning the same thing that I was. And there was the internet at the time. There was so many exponential aspects of education and learning that have taken place between the 70s and the 2000s. So I questioned the professor. I asked, why are we learning this? Why am I learning about Freud? And one of the classes I was in, which was strange, it was behavior analysis. It was one of the upper tier in psychology. And it was a grad student teaching it. And a student took a picture of the slide and he went to the halt zone. He yelled at the student and said, don't take pictures of these slides. If you aren't able to write everything down, then you don't belong here. And it was a dictation class. It wasn't about psychology. And the professor had so much, well, he wasn't a professor, but the teacher had so much anger. So I spoke to the head professor and I asked, why am I learning this? Why am I learning about Freud? Why am I being tested on my dictation skills? And her short answer was that I didn't have the right to question the curriculum, that she's the teacher, she knows what's best, and that I not to do that. And she sent me to the dean. She didn't want to deal. Yes, she didn't want to deal with me. And I recognize in many ways she was in the halt zone. You know, she probably has a family at home. She has so many classes to teach, all these things. And she was overwhelmed, sent me to the dean. And that's where the zones came about. So I drew a Venn diagram. It was my perspective, her perspective. And then where they overlapped, I highlighted pink. That's the pink zone. That's where she could recognize that for me as a student, I was frustrated that the academic system in the university system was nothing like I thought. I thought there would be much more critical thinking and innovation and teamwork. And for her side, I could understand that she's overwhelmed, that she wants more critical thinking, an updated curriculum. But the academic machine is like a giant boat. It takes time to shift it. So that would have been the pink zone, that part where we could understand
Yeah.
each other's perspectives, but also go our own way. So that's how the zone started.
Okay, so what happened when you went to the dean?
The dean was awesome. She was very understanding. And another part, I do tell the details of this story in my book, Home with Humans, where my experience of going in the lobby to go meet the dean, there were people whispering and like, it was some big deal. And I had no idea that there was like
Hubbub.
yes, exactly. I just thought I was asking the teacher a question. Now I'm going to the dean, but it was a wild experience and very impactful and learning for me. And the dean was very compassionate, took the time to meet with me. I recognize deans do have that tight schedule, and we did get in the pink zone. And she had explained that where it's difficult to change and that it's about funding and there's so many other factors involved and that they're hoping to move in that direction. And another really great part about that meeting is I also brought up how consciousness was not a part of the curriculum in psychology. For me, I feel like it's a very important part of it. And she explained that psychology is more of a science, something that can be measured, whereas consciousness isn't. So that's why it wasn't in the curriculum. So she gave me answers. We were in the higher zone. We had different perspectives, but we did reach that shared understanding. And she even referred me to one of the professors on campus that does work with consciousness and positive psychology. So she gave me that resource and I talked to that professor. And that's when I realized I wasn't going to continue my academic studies because it was similar from him too. Consciousness isn't measurable in the ways that academics like it to be, very binary. There's too many unknowns. But now with quantum physics, the paradigms are shifting. And consciousness and energy, I mentioned non-local communication, signal-less communication is becoming a part of our paradigms, even though it's difficult to measure.
Okay, well, I'll have to have you back on the show to follow that little vein. So, okay, so the pink highlighter, that's where you guys had in common. I'm assuming the yellow highlighter came out when someone was stuck. Like, talk a little bit about the yellow, like what did you highlight yellow and why?
So with this particular example with the professor, it was our unique perspectives, where mine was that the academic system was a disaster and she was the leader of that academic system. So the whole foundation of our thoughts were different.
Yeah, so what happens when someone's stuck in that yellow zone, like assuming or over explaining? How can reflective writing help them reset before stepping into an important conversation?
I would say one of the key ways to shift the mind quickly is the exercise that we did at the beginning of this.
Mhm.
The recognizing the past, being in the present, and recognizing an open future. What that does is it helps lift thinking from a subconscious to a conscious process. So before going into a meeting or giving a speech or having something that's a big deal, it's important to evoke that conscious thinking. And to tie that in with reflection writing, it's going back to the I, writing from the I, speaking from the I, and recognizing that each of us is an individual, and leaning into those differences can really evoke conscious thinking. And then when stepping into that meeting, it's weird. There's a heightened sense of autonomy, but then also a groupness to be open to lifting from a subconscious process of this happened last time, so the same thing's going to happen, to a conscious process of who knows what's going to happen. I'm open to it.
So did you ever go back to that professor and circle back and say, oh, I learned something. Thank you for sending me to the dean?
No, and I've wanted to. I do hope that if I go back to Pullman, Washington, maybe she's still there. I do hope to connect with her again. But after that, I ended it with an email by clearing the air, by saying, hey, so you know what? Maybe I would say yes, that we did have that. I did follow up after the dean and let her know that I have empathy for her, that I recognize. I called her one of the good guys. I said, you're one of the good guys, and we're all in this together to just help psychological understanding. And her response was, it's not good versus bad, and kind of, yeah, we didn't. And that's where I learned good and bad and right and wrong are yellow zone. So they're moral judgments. And if I would have worded my email in the pink zone, I think our final communication would have been better. So that was an instance where I was speaking in the yellow zone by saying, recognizing she was one of the good guys. It's also implying that there's a bad guys, and it opened up a yellow zone kind of yucky door with my poor wording.
There you are. You're so introspective and very, I would say, giving. And not that you had to give, but I commend you. I just commend you.
Thank you, Natalie. I appreciate it. And it was a wild journey. And I feel like I'm meant to do something. I'm meant to help people in similar situations, and that the complications I faced and the path that I walked happened for a reason. And I keep searching for that reason and to turn it into some creative magic like the zones.
Yeah. Well, I think this did it. Yeah. So in college, my tough class was organic chemistry. It's where I met my husband, and we joke and say it was a bonding experience because it was so tough.
And you mean that like dual, like a chemical bond and a human bond? I love that. I love puns. So fun.
But I would like argue the case. A lot of times one time there was a question about the active site. What is the active site in an enzyme? And I described the active site, except for I spelt site wrong. It was supposed to be spelled SITE, and I spelled it SIGHT. And I got the answer wrong. And I was like, I'm not having it. So I, at that time, always wore cowboy boots, lived in Kansas City, and the linoleum floor, my boots would echo down the hall, and I was boom, 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 all the way to his office. Every time, after every test, argue a point. And my fellow students loved it because when I got a point, they got a point.
Yes.
And they're like, there she goes. And so I walk into his office about this thing. He goes, oh my God, Natalie, I got scared because I heard you walking down the hall. And I'm like, I got to tell you, I'm arguing about the fact that you marked me wrong for sight. If this were an oral exam, I would have got it right. He goes, you got it. It's yours. Like, thank you.
That's so fun. We are birds of a feather. I'm one of those people too that speaks to the professors and challenges things. And as you mentioned, it helps the whole group. It's something that we as humans need leaders and need people to guide us as you did.
Yeah. Well, and it does work today, going back to the projects. When someone comes to me and has a concern, I'll bring it up in such a way that it's safe and then people are like, yes, thank you for bringing it out to open. Now we can deal with it. I love it. So now I often hear people say, trust your gut or speak your truth. But what if your truth is buried beneath layers of old stories, fears, ego, social filters? How do you work through all that?
Delicately and slowly. It's a process. If someone has been living in the yellow zone for years and years, there isn't a quick fix or one sentence to change everything. It's more of daily introspection. And as we were talking earlier, that inner knowing. So that's really the key part, because it's my belief that people lose themselves in social media, in other people's perspectives when they want to escape their own perspective. And I find this with me. If I get that sense that I want to distance myself from myself, what I do is I run towards myself and I reflection write. I get back into the I and I think about, why am I feeling this way? And inevitably, by the time I start with simple prompts, in the reflection writing, an example of a prompt would be, I'm proud of myself for blank because blank. Super simple, very easy sentence structure. But what that does is that it primes the mind for the pink zone, to think about being proud of myself and to really get into my essence. So that's how I would say, if someone is feeling overwhelmed in the yellow zone, just all that muck everywhere, to reflection write, to really look into the I.
Yeah, I like that. So there was a time, and my husband and I have been married for 35 years. Yeah.
Oh, that's a beautiful milestone.
Yes, thank you. And so there was a time though where my husband wanted to divorce, and it was a really I was having a major midlife crisis. I had just left a job that I wasn't happy at. Actually, it was a second job, and I wanted to I am the breadwinner of the family, so I wanted to go out on my own, do something entirely different. And I kind of I blamed my husband for me not being able to do this. So I had this resentment towards him. And he was like, there's nothing I can do. I can't get past whatever this is. And he couldn't describe it. And I sat down and I was like, okay, I got to take responsibility here. What is going on with me? And I realized that I was wearing, and that's, you say you talk about, you think in pictures. This picture of me in a cloak, a heavy coat, came to me, and I was like, that coat or that cloak is resentment. I was wearing a cloak of resentment. I was resentful towards my last job. I was resentful towards my boss. I was resentful to the company. I was resentful to my husband. We just had adopted a daughter. I started having resentment towards her. I was like, oh my God, I did not realize I was wearing this heavy cloak in the middle of the summer. And I was like, this cloak, what does it do for me? And it protected me. It protected me from taking responsibility, from accepting responsibility. All of a sudden, everything became their fault. And I thought to myself, well, what if I take off this cloak? And suddenly I felt naked. I was like, if I keep wearing this cloak, I will lose everything. If I let myself be naked, I'm freaking naked. I have a choice: keep the cloak and lose, or just take it off and be naked. And I'm like, well, when I took it off, and I'm like, oh my God, that cloak was heavy. It was hard to carry. And so I ended up taking it off, and it took time for my husband, like, I could see it. Hey, Tom. And there's a wince, like, what is she going to blame me for now? And I was like, it took him time to realize I wasn't blaming him anymore. Hey, Tom, there's a beautiful flower over here. Do you want to see it? Something like that. And I would say for me, that was a huge life changer. And so we were able to keep going.
Yes, that's beautiful. And I'm so proud of you. And I think it's wonderful that you're sharing your story, because in you being vulnerable, it helps all of us who are hearing this to also recognize that we have our cloaks and our ways of blaming others when it's a better time to look inward. And that you really hit a great point about the pink zone and the yellow zone. Of the yellow zone is that victim mentality. As you mentioned, it was your husband's fault. Even though he wasn't doing anything, all that negative energy that built up over time turned you into a victim of the circumstance.
Right.
Where the pink zone is being a warrior, is recognizing, my gosh, I have this cloak on. I need to take this off and I need to move forward and change things. So do you think that that's accurate, that your mindset shifted from being a victim to being a warrior?
I didn't think about the warrior piece of it, but I could say I can agree with that, because it was a warrior towards making sure that I was building something more productive. Yeah.
Yes. And that's kind of my definition of a warrior, is not necessarily in battle, but that moving forward, that mental and physical courage and strength. So that's what I think of as a warrior. And I get that sense with you. Once you took your cloak off, even though you were vulnerable, you were more mighty because of it.
Right. That makes sense. So I was building a strong community around me. In doing that, I'm trying to build a strong community in the workplace as I have these projects. I'm trying to get people to communicate in a very productive way. A strong way to build an impactful community is to be open, honest, and present in our true self. The pink zone helps speakers do this. How does the pink zone, do you think, cause a stronger community?
So I would say one of the big pieces of creating community with the pink zone is what I call pink zone tangibility. So it's a tangible object. It could be for you, Natalie, as you're building your community, to have a mission statement. What type of community are you building? What type of people are you looking for? What are the community rules for that? So there's that deep foundation and understanding between what you're looking for and what I have. And if those two line up, then I know your community is a space for me.
Yeah, I like that. So, like in the projects at work, the mission is to be able to take these projects and make it so that we can build a product or a service that is a win-win for everybody, a win for the customer, a win for the company, a win for the employees, and that we do it in a way that doesn't stress us out. We understand what the scope is. We understand what the cost is that we're going to be putting in. And we understand our timelines so that it all goes smooth and we can look back and say, yes, we did that.
Love that. And then are you the designer of that? Do you create the pink zone tangible object to get the group together?
I would say do not. I say we do.
Ooh, I like that. Yes. Gold star for Natalie. I like that you included the we, that in a group. And as you mentioned before earlier too, that you pay attention to the group as individuals, but also as a we. Very, very good. Very pink zone.
Yay. Well, I want to thank you for your clarity, your depth that you've brought to this conversation, because we went pretty deep. And for our listeners, if this sparks something into you, I want you to consider joining the UnCeiling Zone. And so right now, what we're going to do is we're going to move into the vault, the UnCeiling Zone vault. And I'm going to ask Lynn a bunch of rapid fire questions that are built to help our UnCeiling Zone members get ahead. Awesome. So thank you so much for the bonus segment. And I know that's going to be helpful to our members. Where should I send folks when they want to keep up with you?
My website is a great place. It's zoalq.com. So the Zones of Atlas, Lynn Quinn. The umbrella of what I teach under is called the Zones of Atlas. And I also have a Substack page. So I'm off social media, but that's kind of my one little doorway into the great unknown is my Substack.
Awesome. So thank you so much for being on. I think this was a fantastic, deep conversation, and I know my listeners will enjoy it.
Oh, yes, I enjoyed it too. I learned so much about you, Natalie. And the beautiful thing that I learned is you are a pink zone warrior. So keep leading us into a shared understanding.
All right. I think I should get a sign that says Pink Zone Warrior. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Lynn went from questioning a system that wouldn't bend to creating a model that helps all of us communicate with more compassion, clarity, and calm. By the end of this episode, you learned how to recognize when you're in the pink, yellow, higher, or halt zone. You reset your mindset with intention, and you speak from the I to build trust instead of tension. And this is exactly what season 3 is here to teach us, that growth doesn't happen in isolation. It starts with self-awareness and leads to building communities that lift us higher. That's what UnCeiling You is all about, helping you own your ambition, use your voice, and rise with confidence. And so if you're ready to go deeper, not just to listen, but to practice, come join us at the UnCeiling Zone. It's where we take these insights further with tools, reflection prompts, and real connection that help you apply what you've learned. Join us at the unceilingzone.com. Until next time, keep rising. The ripple has started.